We've got a few tidbits of ArcRaiders news to talk about, including the upcoming roadmap, multiple maps releasing later this year, player trading, and also changes to the expedition system. There's a bunch of cool little details to go over. This all comes through a series of interviews that Games Radar did with Embark's design director, Virgil Watkins. There's a bunch of different articles, but I thought we'd condense everything into one video. So if you prefer listening instead of reading, then listen away. If you prefer reading, then all of the links will be in the pinned comment. So I think a lot of people have been wondering about a roadmap, right, for 2026. And Virgil Watkins did say sometime soon, I believe we're going to be putting out a chunk of a roadmap for the upcoming months. But right now, it is us kind of deciding exactly that cadence, that stuff. And you are correct on the types of content, and we're going to parcel that out across the coming year. So in terms of that types of content, he was referring to new maps, new arc, new weapons, that sort of stuff that we kind of all expect are going to come down the line. They also talked about how when they add new maps, they want all of the maps to sort of feel cohesive and have a themed experience. For example, when you go into Stella Montes, it has this own feel to it, has its own unique arc. And new maps, they want to have a similar cohesive feel. So it's not just another new map. There's new arc, new experiences to take in that are exclusive to that map. The things that he said specifically here is, of course, adding a new map has its own novelty and it's a new place to play and do that. But what else? Thematically, gameplay-wise, how do the enemies and the items and the experiences in that map all point towards something? It's kind of getting that thematically cohesive stuff together that feels like, oh guys, the whatever update just came out for ArcRaiders. Let's go check that out. That's what we're trying to template out for the coming months. Looking at future maps, the ambition is to try and pair it with some type of new experience, whether that's the map conditions or weather conditions we put in that make the play feel different, enemy types or compositions feeling different, or escalating the types of loot available there. Stella Montes was a big jump up in new rarer tech and some new blueprints and things that can drop, and just offering new types of experiences. The Shredder, for example, is an enemy that currently only appears in Stella Montes. How do we keep not necessarily escalating all the time, but giving you a new way of play, a new way to approach, making you make different decisions with things you've already been using in one context and trying to use it in a different way in another context, and providing more options for the player. Like, can zip lines now be used in this way? Or now I have a far greater use for things like mines and noisemakers because of the way this level is and plays, things like that. So basically, they want to make more maps, but they want each map to have its own sort of gameplay loop. And this is an interesting part. They also said there are going to be multiple maps coming this year. And I think it's going to be across a spectrum of size to try to facilitate different types of gameplay. So you might see some that are smaller, and you might see some that are even grander than what we've got now. Bearing in mind, maps do take quite a while to develop. I know Embark has a lot of tools to speed up development, but, these things are multiple months in development already. So they probably got quite a rough idea of, what maps are coming out next. They just don't want to spill the beans. So honestly, if they're saying there's multiple maps coming this year, I generally think there's probably multiple maps already getting closer to finishing in terms of development. So that's pretty exciting. It looks like some of the features we're going to get in terms of content throughout the year will be new maps, and quite a few of them. I'm sure we'll get new arc, new weapons, new items as well, and that'll expand on the overall experience we can get when we play in ArcRaiders. They also wanted to talk about trading. You may have seen that previous interview where the Embark CEO talked about how they'd like to try and add trading to ArcRaiders, and Virgil Watkins kind of added more onto this topic and made it very clear what they do and don't want to do with trading. Now, what the Embark CEO said, Patrick Soderlund, before, we should do more with the trading part of the game. We should also allow people to trade amongst each other. I think it's fun. We absolutely have to look at that long term. We haven't decided on anything yet, but that's the fun part of building something like this. This is really the start of something, and there are so many things that we can look into adding to the game. Understandably, a lot of people are a little bit worried about a potential trading system. It could completely ruin the economy and the whole purpose of finding items in the first place, and could really make the game feel different. Luckily, Virgil Watkins carefully explained what they really meant by trading. We're not building an auction house or anything like that. Currently, I think it's more leaning into the aspect of social facilitation in that sense of our design. What does that mean exactly? One thing we really wanted to do, and may still try to do, is it's fine to trade by just dropping something on the floor and you can pick it up, but we really want to do an offer where you hold it out to someone and you can actually interact with the thing in your hand to take it from you. And it's kind of a small thing, but it feels a lot better than, here's your thing I threw on the floor for you. So I think it's things on those ends. He also said that going towards a sort of auction house system or a player-based trading market is very risky territory. In fact, he also continued by saying, we've put a lot of very, very deliberate effort into making the game about the items. We've previously explored and even partially built a trading system like an auction house. But what it ended up doing is it turned the game into just being about coins, going in and finding items that are worth the most value, changing them in for coins, and just buying the things you want. Now you have to be very careful about going in, exploring the correct location, and searching the right containers, or feeling cool that, oh, finally I needed this thing, and now I can go do the other thing that I wanted to do with it. It's very clear the devs do not want to do a traditional marketplace system or anything like that, but they would like to add some cool way of maybe meeting another player in a raid, and you have the opportunity to do some kind of trading interaction with that player, which would be quite a cool way to do it. It's a social sort of trading system, but there's no like backbone economy for player trading or some kind of marketplace. There are many other topics touched on in this interview, and I'm sure more details will come out over time. One thing that was interesting is the interviewee talked about how they felt frustrated with gearing up and the time it takes to go through so many different menus. And Virgil Watkins said, I've literally done the same thing, where I'm just like, I'm going to go free this time. Let's just go in there and go and do stuff. He completely acknowledged the fact that going through menus and clicking a bunch of buttons to build out your loadout is time-consuming and a little bit frustrating. When asked about a loadout system, he responded by saying, I think that's a completely valuable thing, where it just attempts to do its best job to fulfill your request with your loadout. It's like, well, you're short on this resource and that resource, here's what you get, that type of thing. We've already done what we can to get the matchmaking and stuff as fast as possible, so if we can, not to say keep you out of the front end, but get you through the front end faster, I think that's a great ambition too. Because you're like, let's get back in there. And you know there's points in games where friction is good, and spending time is good, and making you be attentive is good. Looking through a bunch of menus isn't necessarily it. So no sort of loadout system is currently in development, but it's in talks, and the devs completely understand our frustration and have probably already had multiple conversations about it already. Hopefully that's something that can come down the line then. Another really interesting topic that was touched on was the expedition system and how the requirements might change, because they felt like the 5 million coin thing didn't really hit the mark, and I think everyone in the community can agree. They did say that 1 million players finished the first expedition, and around 40 to 45% of those players did so with at least 5 million coins. He continued by saying that they probably came out a bit late with the 5 million coin requirement, and I personally agree, they could have given that to us a little bit sooner. But they said that they were deliberately holding back so that they could measure that value against where other players' actual economies were at. We did pin it around the average player's current wealth, earn rate, things like that, and with the intent for the full 5 skill points to be aspirational. He continued by saying, I think there was a perception that players felt compelled to do it, like they needed to do it, which I think invited a lot of, oh, I'm only going to use my worst guns or free run. So I think it created a bit of a dark pattern for some players, feeling that they shouldn't play as intended. He added that this system will change, and they're not precious about it. They will keep adjusting to make sure it is properly incentivizing players. And they have to be very careful about the rewards and the mechanics involved, not giving you a very direct advantage over someone who's just starting the game or hasn't done as many as you. So that's the space that they want to stay in. And when asked about if the 5 billion coin count will be re-evaluated, Watkins said that they're actively looking at that now. In fact, the reason they chose that mechanic is that that's what they had time to do up to launch. So they didn't really have time to set up a proper system. So they're now looking at things differently to hook into that system, or maybe different criteria entirely for the next expeditions. And they said that they'll probably talk about that a little later once they have their ducks in a row. So the 5 million coin count requirement may change. Maybe instead of getting coins, it will be something else, like defeating Ark or some other kind of in-game activity, as opposed to just stashing up a bunch of value. Even the devs themselves realize that is not a good, healthy gameplay loop, right? You spent the whole season collecting all these items, and now you can't even use them, which goes completely against the whole point of wipes in extraction shooters in the first place. So I'm sure changes will come. Whether or not it comes this season or the next one, we don't know. But eventually, I think we're going to not have to worry about stashing up 5 million coins every single time we want to do the expedition. Watkins also added that the current intent is that skill points will not be the reward forever, and it will cap out at some point to whatever makes sense. And the intent will be that if you've done enough expeditions to have the full amount of extra skill points, maybe there'll be a couple of extra quality of life changes that will be rewarded to you instead. So essentially, there will be a cap to how many skill points that you can get, and it won't be possible for us all to just completely unlock every skill in the skill tree. Eventually, there will be a limit. That just about wraps up everything covered in the interviews so far from Games Radar. I'll put all of the links in the description if you want to read it for yourself. We should be expecting a Toxic Swamp map condition and a pretty sizable update, I hope, next week. Hopefully that doesn't have to be delayed, but from rumors along the internet and what people are posting online, that does seem to be lining up next week. So hopefully we've got an update there, and a full roadmap for the next few months should be dropping fairly soon. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you in the comments. Cheerio.